Welcome everybody to our Lift Up Women in Life Sciences live event. We are back this month in February 2026 and I can't wait to bring our inspirational key speakers into this live broadcast because today we're talking about breaking the glass lab, women leading scientific innovation, and I have got some phenomenal key guests that are joining us today that have gone through extensive careers within life sciences, STEM, just done some phenomenal, career journeys that they're going to be sharing with us today and some of their key takeaways along that experience and journey. So for those of you that have never joined a Lift Up live broadcast before, we have been established now for nearly 3.5 years. We've been going for quite some time, and our mission here is all about connecting, inspiring and championing women all the way from academia through to C-suite. And Lift Up is part of Fraser Duff International, which is an executive search life sciences firm. And really how it came together, I guess, is it was born from a group of female ambassadors within Fraser Duff who we thought, we speak to so many senior leaders globally through the nature of what it is that we do, that we thought, why not get some of our great candidates, connections, networks speaking to help inspire the next generation and other individuals within this life sciences space. So every single month we've been doing a live broadcast. We've touched on topics from menopause to D&I to women in STEM to high performance. And obviously today we're talking about breaking the glass lab. So very excited to dive into this one. Also, for any of you that are completely new and you haven't met myself, I'm Louise Williams. I am the MD here within Fraser Duff. I've been in staffing for 20 years, life sciences for the last 11 years or so. And what I'd love to say to you, that if any of you are dialing in as we speak, is say hello and build your network. Your network is absolutely key in the space right now. And I think that this Lift Up broadcast really gives you the opportunity to tap in and build and extend those relationships. So pop into the comments where it is you're dialing in from, your name, what part of life sciences perhaps you sit within, and get involved. And likewise, this is a live broadcast that's interactive, okay? So if you've got any questions for our key speakers as we move on, pop in a little queue in front of your question within the comments, and I will try to pull them through and pull them out as best as possible and bring them up on screen. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in Tanya Bos, and Tanya is going to do her introduction for us. Lovely to have you here, Tanya.
Yes, thank you. And hello, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here. And of course, to be joining the rest of the panel. You're soon going to meet also Catherine and Emma. I'm joining you from the UK, and Louise, a massive thank you. I genuinely admire what Lift Up is doing to elevate women across the life sciences, and I feel very honored and pleased to be part of the conversation today. So I guess let me give you a little bit about me. I've spent the last 25 years in the life sciences, working across both local, regional, as well as global roles in large pharma, as well as biotech, primarily focused in the area, and I'm going to call it small C commercialization. If I had to summarize my career in one sentence, I would say I bring scientific innovation to patients worldwide. That's my commitment. It's really what I do. And the roots of where this began actually go to Canada, where I'm from. And I started my career, funnily enough, or maybe not, in very operational. And I was in field sales, an area that I absolutely loved. But it also gave me many of the foundations that have really shaped my career and where it's gone since. And you think about it's having ambition, it's building resilience, it's learning to collaborate, how to influence without authority, and also navigating ambiguity when you can't always control the outcome. And I also got to see firsthand the absolute critical importance of bringing innovation to patients and how important access is for those patients. And that perspective has always stayed with me. And I would sum up then, so today, where am I? I spend, I would say, 99% of my time working at the intersection of science and commercial. It's shaping disease area strategy, it's building and leading incredible cross-functional teams, and most importantly, creating pathways that really bring medicines to patients worldwide. And that's what drives me. So again, thank you, and I look forward to the discussion today. It should be great.
Thank you, Tanya. Lovely introduction. And, every leader I speak to is having that kind of inner anchor and sense of passion that so often just keeps driving people such as yourself forward. So thank you for sharing that incredible journey. And Emma Tinsley, we've got today as well. Lovely to have you. If you wouldn't mind doing an introduction to the audience for us.
Yeah, thanks, Louise, for having us. So Emma Tinsley, coming from London as well, but unfortunately without the glamour of a Canadian background. So it's a pleasure to join today. I have a career which has effectively been shaped by a single number that I've been obsessed with, which is the 90% failure rate in clinical trials. And we blame biology for an awful lot. And I set out on this bit of journey 9 years ago to see what we could do to reduce technical risk and improve the probability of success, because that number sits in every decision we make about what medicines we try and make for patients. And if we can move the needle on that, it really opens up the space. So I'm founder and CEO of Weatherden, which is the clinical development company. We spent a lot of time working across more than 250 assets, different TAs, trying to work out what works across modalities, what's translatable, and how do you improve the probability of success. We worked out we were pretty good at it. And then last year, moved into a hub and spoke model where we were also doing venture creation. So in-licensed an asset and created a new company called Elevara Medicines, which is looking at a small molecule for early combinations in RA as well as other immunological conditions. So I'm CEO of that as well. Two CEO jobs. Yeah, which is a lot of fun because we're running it with the same team, which is about the only thing that makes it doable. And raised 75 million last year. So I guess recent experience on the fundraising side as well. Before that, before founding Weatherden, I was on the investing side. So I was SV Health Investors. Initially was working on the public firm, but then went all the way to the other end and started doing biotech company creation. So started 5 biotech companies, pulling things out of academia and getting them off the ground. Before that, I was in pharma life sciences consulting, where I took a bit of a turn and also got financially qualified, and I'm an accountant as well. And then if you go all the way back, chemistry. So a bit of a mixture, but
yeah. Started in the chemistry world, and then investment, and now CEO of biotech businesses. What a phenomenal career, Emma. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really looking forward to the further discussions. And last but certainly not least, we've got Catherine Pearce. Thank you for joining us, Catherine. If you wouldn't mind doing your introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me, Louise. It's good to be back and really in the company of Tanya and Emma. This is an excellent group to have this conversation. I'm Catherine Pearce. I'm currently the CEO and founder of JucaBio, a hub and spoke biotech company. The most popular subsidiary under Juca right now is perhaps a company called AllRock Bio. We have a phase 2 oral pan-ROCK inhibitor that's being studied in pulmonary hypertension. This is my second hub and spoke model. Most recently, before this, I was the chief operating officer and a founder of Syncor, a company that we took public in 2022 and then sold that organization, that asset called Baxdrostat, to AstraZeneca in 2023. So very happy to get the opportunity to prop up another biotech organization. I've spent my entire career in this industry since the 90s. I started at Roche and was at Merck. And then worked for a CRO for a number of years. So my background really is primarily operational in nature, which is a great compliment to Tanya and very similar to what Emma's doing. So a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Catherine. I feel like I'm surrounded by some very inspirational experts here. So really keen to dive into some of these questions that we've also had come through from the community. So thank you. What I would love to do, though, is just get some details sharing here on the screen. We've got Olivia dialing in from London. We've got Kelly Beck. Thank you for joining us, Kelly. We've got Nahid as well joining us. We've got a real reach here, actually. Nahid from India, and then we've got US. We've got Seema as well in market access and Zurich. Apologies if I can't make my way through everybody here, but it's lovely for you all to dial in. Thank you so much for coming in. And as I said before, if you missed it right at the very beginning, if you've got any questions for our speakers, pop in a queue in front. I hope Tanya isn't angry at us here in the USA for the win in the gold medal hockey games last week. I don't know who put that. Yeah.
Too soon.
They've also
First time for everything.
I love that. Yes, if we can't see your name, it's because I think you might have it on privacy settings switched off. But Christy's also joining in as well from Ohio. We've got somebody here from Boston. But yeah, look, lovely. Keep them coming in. And as I said, put in a Q, if I can find my banner here. Please put in a Q in front of the questions to make it easier for me to see the comments as we go throughout. So I'm going to kick off with a question maybe around from going from a doing to directing. You know, you kind of enter in as a scientist or a chemist, you enter in sort of early STEM. So if we say, take us back to the moment that you realized you weren't just doing science anymore and you were actually suddenly leading it or directing it, what kind of shifted for you, you know, whether it's in your role or whether it was a mindset shift? I'll come to you first, Tanya, if that's okay.
Gosh, I'm the first across the board today.
Yeah.
So, you know, I was reflecting on this one, and I have to be honest, I think for me that first shift was when I had my first true cross-functional leadership role. I do think you spend a lot of the time, especially for me as I started, you know, you want to be the best at everything. You're that expert. You are the one where the buck stops, and you'll dig deep and know all those answers. But when you pivot, and for me, it was my first global role, it was a global commercial lead. And all of a sudden, I found myself accountable for a product strategy, for launching a global brand across 50 plus countries, and having to lead and build a global brand team, identify the talent that had to be in there, and also being part of a global program team, which is with all the R&D and regulatory colleagues and operations, and providing that commercial voice. And as I said, it was in that role that I think I really, truly first felt the value of cross-functional leadership, and that my job was no longer going to be about having the best answer or being the expert on everything. It was going to shift to being about asking the best questions and bringing the right people together. And this is really making that movement from, okay, so how am I going to deliver this, to what's the future we're designing for, and how are we going to come together to make that happen? And I think that leadership pivot is when I really made that first change. So there's my thought.
Yeah, I love that, Tanya. I think that's a very mature leadership mindset, isn't it? I spoke to a CEO about a month or so ago, I think on the West Coast, and she'd been running this business for nearly 8 years and wanted to go and set something else up. But she said for her, like, letting go was so difficult, but she realized the biggest strength in that decision making for her, and what took her to the next level, was actually relinquishing that control and hiring a diverse enough team beneath her that, and gave them the autonomy to go and do it. That's where she ended. So it just reminded me of something of that when you were sharing that. Yeah. And you know, Catherine, come to you with the same question. What's your thoughts with this?
No, I think Tanya said it very well. I had a similar experience when I was at Teva leading the new therapeutic entities group, because it became a cross-functional team, much like Tanya, where we had to pull in commercial and preclinical and other physicians to decide what drugs we were going to take forward. So I was not the one running the project, but now it was my job to solicit these opinions and this expertise to pull them in. The only thing I would add to what Tanya's saying is, you know, that mindset of letting go, you really have to get comfortable being vulnerable. And, you know, that's a tough position for people who, as Tanya describes it, are kind of used to being the experts in that particular discipline. But that's where the real magic happens, is if you're willing to be humble, you know, in the midst of people who know a lot more than you, there's a lot of opportunity to just listen and synthesize information. And I think that's really what takes, to your point, to the next level it versus being just an individual contributor and now being a leader.
Yeah, I love that. There's definitely that strength, isn't it? Because just coming back to, I remember her saying to me, the person that I've now hired, I think is going to be a better CEO than I am. But she said it's actually, that's quite, in a way, she was like, it's a hard thing to swallow to admit, but equally I feel like I've actually done all the right things, because I've managed to hire somebody not only who's capable of doing that, but actually, you know, keep them, retain them, hire them. So I've obviously done something right. So it was a really nice way of looking at it. And now she's obviously off, you know, trying to build something else, and it gives her the freedom to do that. But it was an interesting take. But Emma, what's your thoughts?
So it's an interesting one. I'm not sure I've ever been a real scientist, I guess, because I moved across to the business side so quickly. Although we have a running joke that I'm doing the slowest medical degree in history at the moment by osmosis, hanging out with these guys. But I'm definitely a scientific thinker, and I've always been sort of endlessly curious. But I think I've always been drawn to that almost that directing above, because I'm really fascinated by patterns and heuristics and trade-offs between different disciplines and what can you bring from sort of having a different lens on the world. I think Catherine's, like, the point about vulnerability is so right. You know, I became the CEO of a drug development company when I was 31 and had never done drug development. There was no other option to lead but with that vulnerability. But the fascinating thing that came out of that is then you get this psychological safety for other people to open up and to ask the questions and to be curious and actually like push on that collective mindset of truth seeking and curiosity and discovery. So it's not just about sort of the letting go of control in your day-to-day life and breathing easier. It's also the impact it has on other people, I think is fascinating.
Yeah, and I'd imagine you probably created some really good followership from your people with that mindset approach. You know, I know that's not always an easy thing for someone to talk about themselves in that way, right? But we talk about at the moment EQ, IQ, CQ. We talk about the importance of having cultural alignment, value alignment, empathetic leadership. You know, that EQ, CQ is a really important element for leaders to have. And you're coming in with quite a humble, open, collaborative mindset, which is obviously really working, isn't it? So no, that's great.
It's a running joke that I'm the village idiot in the best village. So
I love it. I feel like you're full of one-liners. I'm gonna have to keep some of these. Brilliant. Well, look, if we're coming back to hitting the glass lab, so to speak, I know it's a bit of a term that we've kind of created here, but I guess the idea here is that, you know, there are still a significant low number, a low proportion of women, right, that are in STEM. I think, you know, 22% globally, but I think, you know, Catherine had some statistics. It was under 10%, wasn't it? Still single figures from a senior leaders, CEO within the biotech world. You know, and really what we want this broadcast to be is an inspiring platform for whether it's female leaders, you know, at management, director level, wanting to continue their career through to VP, C-suites, all those that are studying and they want to get into the industry for the first time. It's kind of understanding that there is no limit, and, you know, it's trying to break through that if you're ever feeling like there is one. But a question, I guess, for you ladies is, can you share one moment where you felt like maybe you'd hit that glass lab hard, perhaps an invisible rule, a bias, a barrier that maybe would have stopped you in your tracks? And what is it that you maybe did about it at the time? I'll come back to you, Tanya, with this question first, if that's okay. No, I won't do it again next time. I feel like I'm going round, but I won't do it again next time.
It's totally fine. It's totally fine, because I've been actually thinking a lot about Catherine and Emma's journey with this one as well, because what I thought of was, you know, it's when you don't fit the mold of what people expect that person should be in that role. And you both made me think of that as you were talking. So, and I think it's when you realize you're not that traditional person, but yet, you know, you've been given that opportunity and you can really drive a leadership up and drive the leadership. And I think where this really stood out for me, I was going through a company acquisition. Like in any acquisition, roles evolve, operating models evolve. And my position had shifted from co-leading a global program team, which again is that group with R&D and regulatory and development and medical, but primarily really probably being more of the commercially leading person, to having sole accountability. And I'm taking responsibility that spanned both R&D and commercial. My first reaction at that time was, oh my God, I'm so excited. This is going to be incredible. What a great opportunity. A split second later, I went, oh crap, can I really do this? You know, but what I wasn't prepared for was the narrative I heard around me, which was, she's too commercial. She's not an MD. How can you oversee clinical development when you're not a scientist? And can you even manage an R&D budget? How can you make those trade-offs and those decisions when you're, you know, big C commercial? And in other words, I just didn't fit the template that was in some minds. And I felt like there was this corridor whispering about, you know, can she really do this? And so if I think about what I did, I think first of all, my advice and everything, always be your authentic self. Don't try to be something you're not, but know how to flex the muscles in front of the audience to get the most out of them at the right time. And really to understand and embrace what you bring. And for me, that is strategic clarity, being decisive, aligning, mobilizing, and energizing teams around a common vision. And I was able to shape and lead and build an incredible team of scientific leaders, of champions that all had the same vision in mind. And I could focus on leading and not trying to prove, back to the earlier example, that I knew everything. And I think, I was able to build trust in places that it hadn't been given. And to this day, it's been one of the best roles I've ever had in my career. And I love it, embrace it, and think about that journey very fondly. So there you go.
I love that. Thank you. And it's great for you to share that journey and that story. Emma, what are your thoughts with this question?
So I think in some ways I had an advantage because I knew that I was always going to be an outsider. I don't have a PhD. I'm a woman. I started doing this, C-suite roles when I was 30. I was on boards when I was 25. I was never, ever what anybody expected to show up. I'm financially trained by background. I'm a chemist. I don't understand biology, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. So I quite like being an outsider, or at least I very quickly convinced myself I liked being an outsider, because you've got to live with it. But I think none of those perceptions that people come with have any bearing on whether or not I can do my job. So the ability to lead people, the ability to think strategically, to manage risk, to have ruthless focus on value creation, ultimately the resilience to kind of push through any setback are not qualities that would have changed if I was a PhD man in his 40s, right? That those are sort of qualities that are inherent to me. And so I think the shift for me was understanding that I couldn't control whether or not I matched anyone else's expectations, but I could control execution. And actually, if you stop spending your energy on worrying about what other people think and focus on delivering the outcomes, very quickly the results will quiet that noise. And it's really just, it takes time. There is unfortunately no cheat code, but I would rather have done it my way and learn on that edge than have got all the tick boxes right in the right order and been the person who they expected.
I love that. I think it's so eloquently put as well. And I think it's just having, as of what I'm picking up from you there as well, is that inner confidence in, forget the noise. It's kind of like there's that self-belief, that inner confidence of what your qualities are. The authenticity came through from you, Tanya, and I think it's just, as you said, the results will then just speak for themselves if you continue doing what is best. So lovely. I really agree with that. And Catherine, your thoughts with this question as well. It's quite a
I agree with what Emma and Tanya certainly have felt and experienced some of those same things. But I guess uniquely, I'm operating a biotech company in the Midwest out of Ohio. And I think when you talk about a bias or a barrier, the first thing that venture asks for is, you're not from the West Coast, you're not from the East Coast. How can you possibly operate a biotech in that region? And what I would say is that really does become sort of your superpower, is being underestimated. And so rather than fight the geography and say, I'm not going to be in that area, I'm so sorry. I would rather say, here's an opportunity where no one else is going. That is the definition of innovation, is to look around and see what resources are here and to, kind of stress upon or continue to validate that by showing it, by demonstrating it, as Emma was saying, by execution. So I think, when people call and they're like, well, I think everybody's looking for that recipe of, well, how did you get past? And I would say what our speakers have said, be authentic, understand what you are working with. I know this region and I know the opportunity here, and that is the superpower. Whereas if I was to go to the coast, I would be a little bit behind and not really understand the opportunity as well. And you need to just stick in that lane, and I think that's what really makes people successful.
Yeah, love that. Thank you for that, Catherine. And I think a question's come through from the audience, probably on the back of this and what Emma was saying, from somebody that's got their privacy settings, I think, off. So unfortunately, we can't see who it's from. But it's, if you had to prioritise one skill beyond technical excellence for future leaders, what would it be? Tanya's going to be unhappy with me, but I feel like I'm just giving the other two a break for a minute. Tanya, what are your what are your thoughts with this?
Yeah, I would say embrace the unknown, right? Having that comfort in ambiguity and not knowing all the answers, right? And that capability of just saying, you know what, I don't need to be perfect. I don't need to know everything. Know what you can bring and have that confidence behind you. And I think that's absolutely what will drive you forward.
Yeah. Anything to add to that, Catherine, Emma?
Resilience. Great.
Yeah.
Resilience.
Grit.
Absolutely.
Love it.
I mean, there's so many, it's easy to lead when things are going well. I think the true test of leadership is how are you going to respond? Your own emotional regulation, not taking it personally, saying, now I have to buckle down and do the hard thing next.
Right.
And if you have enough resilience to see that through, I think that's a massive win.
Yeah.
Love that. Yeah.
I love the word grit.
Grit, yeah, and emotional regulation. I think that's a really important
All my
thing.
favorite people have grit.
Excellent. So hopefully that's helped answer that question. Thank you for throwing in. Any others? Keep them coming through. But now we're just talking about challenging the status quo. Okay, so innovation often means being the person in the room that says, who can do this differently in a room that potentially likes the status quo. So what's the boldest kind of idea you've pushed through, and how did you handle the resistance potentially? Now, I think, Catherine, you've touched upon this maybe already now with the sort of geographical location in terms of, you're innovating by doing something different, being in a slightly different space and area. So Emma, come to you with this question first.
Yeah, I mean, I founded an entire company based on challenging the status quo, so I'm a big fan. So when we set up Weatherden 9 years ago, I think the entire premise was that this sort of we didn't believe that clinical trial failure rates were true. Right? Yes, biology is contributing to some of it, but whether you're in large pharma or whether you're in biotech, there are a lot of skills gaps, structural incentives, financial incentives that are leading to poor decision making and poor management of risk that is contributing to that failure rate. And a lot of people didn't agree with that, partly because it's slightly confronting. I think if you're sort of responsible for an industry and people are trying hard, they don't necessarily want the accountability. And also very reasonably might have gone, what does a 29-year-old with no drug development experience have to say on the topic? But I was a patient, and that number feeds into all of the numbers that patients end up, paying for drugs ultimately, but also for the decisions we make about what to try. So I kind of thought, even if we move it by 3%, that might actually make a real difference. That might change the outcome of an MPV when you're plugging it in. And so that really switched me into, I guess, full mission-driven mode. And I didn't really care if I was right or wrong or qualified to ask the question, because no one else seemed to be trying. And I sort of thought, well, this is a hill I'm willing to die on, right? We actually ended up making a much larger impact than even I thought, but the real potential to have that sort of global impact and challenge that orthodoxy is actually where I really come alive. Like, I love seeing things from a different angle. I love bringing an outsider's perspective to stuff. And that really feeds into, I guess, what I said earlier on the truth seekers, company of truth seekers and justice.
Yeah, but we got to be grateful for that. I mean, it's people like you, though, that we end up discovering medicine that we maybe wouldn't have had, or, would have been parked on a shelf for many years because people have just not got the funding anymore. They don't believe in it anymore, that, whatever the reason being. So, I think it's some amazing values that you've got in that regard. So great example. Tanya, anything to add to this on your
that's
side?
A tough one to top.
I know.
No, I find it so inspiring. And I think just generally, when you create something that doesn't exist, it forces change, and change creates resistance, right? So it's this, how do you navigate within that? And I think, for myself, even just recently, my most recent leadership role, I was at Vertex, and I was brought in international to create an organization and figure out what to do with pipeline for ex-US markets, where there was none of this had existed. There was a great idea. We knew we had to do something, but there was no blueprint, no operating model, no team. And I was like, sure, sign me up, sounds fabulous. But, that takes time. And I think when I went into that role, I thought 2 years, easy peasy, right? No problem. And it was the hardest role I've ever had. And because you are navigating change. And it also really, for me, really forced me to look at those 2 or 3 things, like those big, I heard another leader tell her story where she talked about choosing the big rocks and letting all the little rocks in the sand go. And it's not that your jar won't get those in it one day, but focusing on those big rocks and being really, resilient to sticking with 2 or 3 things, letting the rest go and driving that forward. And I think then you can start to move the needle. And I would also add to that, it's supporting, it's being surrounded by a coalition of believers. So I think for Emma, that sounds like it's very much in your organization to me today. For me at Vertex, it was definitely international leadership team. I mean, they held my hand on everything. And we together delivered the same message over and over and over again. And I think then when people then own part of the change and they see themselves inside the change and they realize that change isn't about disruption, it's about risk mitigation. It's not about theory, it's about acceleration. It's not about more investment, it's about greater patient value. And then you start getting momentum and things
love that.
And that's exciting. And it's really exciting. So yeah,
amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And the journey, Vertex, is so important. I think the word belief, getting that belief from the team that you're working with, and feeling like you're doing it together, isn't it? Bit of a unified approach. Catherine, anything else to add to this?
I agree with my colleagues on the phone here. I would just say that, you should accept failure. You should actually welcome failure and people telling you no on your idea. So you have to be, a rabid champion for your idea. And I was thinking, when we went out to raise money for Syncor, which we sold that company ultimately for $1.8 billion to AstraZeneca. So arguably a success. But in the beginning, I used to keep a running list of the no's. And I would hype myself up because I was like, okay, now we're 50 no's. 50 venture capitalists have turned me down. I'm going to go into 51. So statistically, I should hit someone soon that will say yes. But, you need all those failures along the way to get, and they're not personal, but it really is you're on a journey here. But if you stick the course and you believe, wear those failures proudly. And now it's not unusual. I'm not discouraged by the no's anymore because, I've kind of lived in that space and come out on the other side. And so I would encourage anyone who has an idea or is pushing a boundary to as Emma and Tanya pointed out, expect a lot of resistance and just keep going. Failure is okay.
Yeah, that I think absolutely. And you've hit the nail on the head there, right? Because I think globally, statistically, women-led startups only receive about 20% of venture capitalist funding still. That's still very low. And if you didn't have that resilience, right, with JucaBio, with AllRock, even just through your career journey and Emma's as well, it's just you have to have that resilience, don't you, to keep pushing through. So no, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. We've got a couple of questions here. I'm conscious of time, actually. We're moving through quite fast. But just from a structural change and a big ripple effect perspective, maybe, if you could change one structural thing, whether it's funding, authorship, promotion criteria, something else to tilt the odds in the favor of women leading innovation, what would you pick and why? And it's quite a big question, this one, isn't it? It's quite deep as well, because there's probably a few aspects here. Catherine, I'll come to you first, if that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that could be done here, right? But for me, I think it's mentorship. If organizations, or let's just say funding structures, or investment banks or venture capitalists, if it would be activity in mentorship, purposeful, deliberate mentorship. So to look around in these boardrooms and other industries and say, okay, what are we missing here in this room? And be purposeful about going to augment it with someone who doesn't look like everyone else in the room, whatever that means, because we know that it, not just for women, but diversity overall, if you're not doing it as an altruistic measure, it is profitable. And McKinsey had this study come out in 2022. It's a little dated now, but diverse companies in the top quartile are 39% more profitable than companies that are not looking around their boardrooms and saying, what are we missing? What's a complementary skill set in general? So I think structurally that would be the first thing. And then it wouldn't seem so odd to walk into a room and not see anyone that looks like you eventually.
Yeah, very well said. It's just from a gap analysis perspective, isn't it? The more diversity you've got around a table, the more diversity of thought you've got into executing ideas, solutions, strategies, plans. So no, I'm completely with you on that one. And Emma, what's your thoughts with this?
I think it's almost, more of a structural inequality than that, right? So if we define the very nature of leadership from a background of non-diverse groups, we end up getting the wrong things included in the definition in the first place. And that's how the bias perpetuates. So I think some of it is actually taking a step back, taking a data-driven approach, saying actually how do collaborative leadership styles work, which women tend to skew more towards? How do more open communication and EQ actually support teams? How do these things play out? And how do they make more money? Because they do. And the data is starting to emerge, and really making sure that we're recording that and we're pushing back on the very definitions that have got us into these traps in the first place. And then making sure that we are being noisy about them. I think one of the things that I see people doing is a lot of women are trying to prove their worth through delivery. And delivery is really important. I'm a very delivery person, but delivery and success does not mean just sitting behind your laptop and finishing the 17th document you've written that day. It means going out, building your network, championing others, putting a spotlight on stuff. That stuff is as important as finishing the spreadsheet, sadly. So.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. We can maybe touch on that. We've got another question that came through from the audience that kind of taps into that space. But Tanya, anything else in regards to this question before we move on?
Yeah, I think everyone's saying so many great points. I think the only thing I added when I looked at your list, I also still stuck on promotion criteria a little bit. And I think as much as it pains me, I still feel like if you jump up and say you need balance and you think about that being important, that you get penalized for it. And whether balance comes from having a family, wanting to have, pick up kids from practice, that it means that you're, going through menopause that you mentioned earlier, Louise. So I think, and yet I think as women leaders, we shy away from it being an important value. And if we talk about it, does that mean you can't get to where you need to be because somebody won't be talking about it, right? And so I think that's one that hung on me. It's sort of more just in my own mind of saying, is it still there? And I feel like it is. I certainly has impacted me in my earlier career more so than it does today, but I do think it's still there. And the fact that we have to have sessions on these topics show that it still is and how to navigate that. So
it definitely is, and different continents, different countries, different legislations and areas obviously operate in different ways. And obviously being a global search firm, I have conversations sometimes where we've got, a female at final, and then we're discovering from a relocation perspective that she's got a couple of children, and then the whole conversation around, so who's going to look after the kids when she's doing this, and is there a partner, and what's the schedule, and I'm not sure we'd be able to make that work, and it so mobility
was the one that I really that can really. And what do you do with that? So
it's
anyway.
definitely still there, definitely still out there, and becoming a little bit of a blocker. I'm just making sure I'm not missing any questions that are coming through. But there was something around here about women changing the game, and now I'm thinking, forward thinking, right? For anybody dialing in here, is right now, where do you see women having the biggest impact in science and innovation? And are there important problems or perspectives that are maybe still being overlooked? And I think in my head, Emma, with what you were saying around, don't just sit behind a desk, don't just be focused on delivery. It's getting out there. I don't know whether this sort of ties a little bit into what you were saying there maybe, Emma? Is there anything to add to this question maybe?
Yeah, so particularly on that theme, I think that the Biotech CEO Sisterhood has done an enormous amount of good for over the last couple of years in terms of connecting people, putting a spotlight on it, trying to challenge some of these assumptions, and genuinely supporting people behind the scenes, right? I've got this problem, put it on the Slack, someone will pick up the phone, right? It's getting a bit big now. Maybe it's not as how it was in the early days, but like genuine remote, decentralized support. And particularly selfishly, as someone sitting in Europe, we suddenly then end up with better US connectivity than some of the men do this side, which is great. I think the other thing that is starting to change that I'm excited about, I guess, is finally seeing some more drug development in women's health, because that drives me bananas. It's so much white space, so much unmet need, and this sort of perception that, oh, well, no one will buy it. And I think that's starting to shift now slowly. So that's the thing I want to see happen next.
Yeah, love that. I did a broadcast about 18 months ago on menopause and women's health, and for the UK alone, how much they were investing into clinical trials in that space. And I feel like it's getting talked more about now publicly, which is brilliant. Still, a fair way to go. But yeah, completely agree with you there, Emma. Catherine, what are your thoughts with this question?
Yeah, I won't be redundant to Emma, but I would just add, going back to women in households and in general, they have the power of the purse in a lot of healthcare decisions and innovation. So being more mindful of soliciting those ideas from women who are making decisions for their family and their children and their own health, I think we need to do more to just listen to those voices and start to incorporate it into some of the innovation, in addition to actually studying women's health. Talking to them about what's going on in the ground is very important too.
Yeah, love that. Thank you, Catherine. Tanya, anything to add to this?
That one, good. I just thought the time too. So yeah, no, I think it's continue to get more visibility for women within board roles, within the investor world, and really elevate. And I think the Biotech CEO Sisterhood has already been mentioned, which has just been amazing to see the visibility they're creating, but still a long way to go.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think we've got some good connections at this Biotech Sisterhood as well, and they've been brilliant. And JP Morgan as well, like they've kind of sponsored and done a lot of work there, which has been pretty phenomenal over the last couple of years. In fact, we had Sheila on a live broadcast about 12 months ago. I think it was about January last year. So she's brilliant. But look, I can't believe how quickly the time's going. So I kind of got to, I know, I'm just trying to find maybe the last question to finish up on. But imagine a young woman starting in your field today who wants to break the glass lab in her own way. What's one brave, concrete step you'd love her to take in the next 12 months?
I would say be brave and reach out to someone that you really admire and ask for their time. And that's one concrete step that I think always, you don't know the ripple effect until you look backwards many years of making those connections, but invest in it actively.
Yeah.
Love that. Yeah. That's anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to say, ask for a meeting that you feel slightly underqualified for, and have those discussions. And I think we've talked a lot about mentoring and allyship, but give yourself a seat at the table. Because it's often exactly, because the chair is not always going to be pulled out for you. So raise your hand.
Yeah, I love that.
And be vulnerable and humble and ask and be curious. So
yeah, excellent, brilliant. And I know we've got Emma nodding there. Last but not least, then here, what one piece of advice would you give your younger self, Emma?
I got there, and I got there relatively early, but I guess it also feeds into the last question, which is find the thing that you care enough about to make the sacrifices, so that you do not care about the failure, so that you do not care about what people think, and so that you are willing to put your energy in. Like leadership and being ambitious and achieving these goals is not easy or straightforward. There are compromises. So find the thing you care enough about to get you through those moments and keep the grit going. And if you don't know what it is yet, work out what really makes you angry, because that's probably it.
It's related.
Yeah.
I love that.
Follow the signal.
Yeah. Catherine, your one bit of advice you'd give your younger self?
I mean, to have balance. I mean, work is wonderful and great, but actually a lot of innovation, a lot of energy comes from balancing your life, taking care of your health, making sure you have strong friendships, and your relationships at home are great, so that is a really important thing, just to prioritize and not to let it, kind of simmer while you're building a career, but be active in both.
I know a coach said to me here in the UK, Anna Mosley, she calls it recharging your batteries. If you're constantly just 20% battery low, from a performance and an output perspective, you're never going to be operating high performance. But getting that chance to recharge your battery. Yeah, love that. And Tanya?
Yeah, I mean, what great advice to everyone. I wish I was the younger self. I was just going to say, don't waste your energy on trying to believe you belong. You already do. So you don't need to prove it. You're already there. And the amount of energy we exhaust on trying to make others happy.
It's very true.
Own your path, own your destiny. And
there is a saying, and I don't know what the statistics are, but we had a neurological kind of psychology coach come into our business a few years ago, and he used to, the amount of like negative thoughts that you think a day versus your positives is unbelievable. So it's kind of pushing those things to the back. I know it was quite frightening when I heard. But yeah, I love that. Believe in yourself, confidence, resilience. You've given some excellent advice, and hopefully we've covered off as many questions as we possibly can, really, within 45 minutes. So thank you so much for joining us today. And for everybody else that has been dialing in, thank you for sharing some of those things in the comments. If there's anything I've not got through to, I can always have a look back afterwards. Reshare, send this to colleagues, family, friends. We get 3,000 to 4,000 sometimes reshares of these live broadcasts. So thank you so much for our key speakers as well for joining us today. I've really enjoyed the discussion.
Thank you.
And enjoy the rest of your days. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Bye.